Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Absolute BSS, the Casualpetitive podcast about Bandai Namco's Battle Spirit Saga. Cam unfortunately could not make it to this episode, so it's just me and Angel today, and we're recording on my laptop, which I'm discovering is an old piece of shit. So if you're watching the video version of this podcast, you don't see Angel's camera, unfortunately. It's just me, and I don't even have my cool Discord background. So hopefully that's all right with you today, watcher, if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, doesn't matter at all. So just pretend I didn't say anything. It's a totally normal episode of Absolute BSS. But I am joined today by Angel. Welcome, Angel. How you doing today?
Doing good. Hello, everybody. I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
Doing great. So we're just a little peek behind the curtain here. We're recording this episode Thursday evening before we leave for the Pro Tour next week. We just wanted to get one more recording in before we leave for the Netherlands. So if anything crazy has happened, and if it's like, why are we not talking about this? It's because we don't know about it yet. So
yeah, it's still undisclosed. It's like we can't foreshadow that much.
My prediction is people continue going nuts about Gale.
Yeah, that has spread like wildfire for sure. I know we talked about it a lot. I think the last podcast, and it's definitely a wildfire, and I mean it's a good wildfire though, right? Because I mean it is broken. I mean Gale is going to be very interesting the first half of the new set for sure.
Yeah. If people listen to the very last episode, I think it was, I expressed my concerns for I think Hurricane Highlands is potentially more harmful to the game than Netherworld Depths was. So definitely concerned about that. I'm still going to be playing, I don't know about you, but I'm still planning on playing Gale when set 3 comes out. I think that's going to be my go-to deck, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'll definitely be trying out Gale for sure. I mean, if I can somehow make it to the first, well, I guess it'd be the second Grand Open because the first one would be in the Netherlands, but the one in America, if I can make it to that, I'm sure I'll be playing Gale just to try it out. I think this is a time for green to shine, even if it's just for a little bit. So it'd be pretty cool to see. But definitely, yeah, Gale's definitely the top of my list of first archetypes to play, along with either a Crush / Mermaid build with blue. So, but Gale's definitely top contender. It's just so broken. It really is.
Yeah, that's my thing is I feel like I should play it while I have the chance because I can't imagine a world where it doesn't end up getting banned. Unless, I mean, I could be wrong about that. I very well could be, but I was actually thinking right before we started recording, ever since we discovered how good Gale is, and I've been so set on playing it for set 3, I've kind of stopped looking at other cards, and I should really go back to doing that because there could be something really, really good in red that I'm just not seeing. And if Hurricane Highlands does get banned or restricted or limited, or even if maybe people just figure out a way to beat it and Gale isn't as good as we think it is, I'm going to need somewhere to pivot. So I should really be prepared.
I think with Gale, or not Gale, but Hurricane Highlands, maybe just early to say this, but I think the best option for that is not banning it, right? Because that card is needed for Gale to really be efficient, but definitely limiting it, right? If you can only run one, or just say even 2 copies of it, that at least stalls you enough a little bit that you're not just going off with 4 copies and your probability of seeing it is a lot less. That it'll still be crazy, but at least we'll make it a little bit more manageable than just knowing that you can drop 4 or 3 of those, by turn 4 or 5, and then now you're ramping 3 times the X amount. I think that might help because I would hate for that card to get banned because I think at that point it really does not make Gale. I mean, it's good, but it's not as good, right? Or maybe as reliable. So I would like for that card to at least see some play. I mean, the card just came out, so we'll see. It should be interesting to see how Bandai does it. And I'm sure they'll be looking very closely at that because I know there's a lot of wild posts all over the place about already. Card's not even out yet.
Yeah,
I think it's like I say, it's more than Deaths. Deaths had a whole pitchfork and riots. This one's the card's not even out yet in circulation, and people are always saying ban it or get rid of it. So it's interesting. It's fun to see though.
Yeah, I'm in a weird spot on it because I am so excited for it. I cannot wait to play Gale. Green is going to be so good. But at the same time, I do care about the health of the game, and I know that if this is a really oppressive strategy, it could make the game like very unfun very quickly. So I am just kind of keeping an eye on it. But yeah, maybe I'm jumping too quickly to say ban it, but I'm also like one of the people who's going to be playing the hell out of it until whatever happens. So
Yeah, I mean, in any game, right? You don't want the games to be stale or a format that's hell, right? Like, I mean, in a way,
yeah,
we sort of went through that, and I don't want to say it was hell. I mean, it was annoying and it was bad and a little challenging here and there, but it wasn't horrible. But I mean, we just went through an axe spider depth meta for like 3 to 4 months, and if you
yeah,
see anybody topping any event, it was almost the same decks or the same style. So it's I don't want that to be what Gale's like, right? Like if you're seeing top eight and everybody's playing Gale, mirror matches are gonna be freaking horrible. But definitely, like I said, I want to see what kind of balance Bandai does with this. We can talk about this on another thing, but like this is a Bandai. One thing I noticed with a lot of the games, even One Piece, right? Like it's very like exclusive to like a certain color or a certain play style, and a lot of their card games have that issue where I think that the balancing is just not there. And I don't know if just more R&D needs to go into some of these cards, or they're just saying, let's just see what
yeah.
happens. Like 'cause some of these cards, I'm like, who sat in the lab and said, yeah, this is gonna be great? Like it's like, no, it's not.
I feel like I agree. Like, there was some discussion about how Hurricane Highlands is almost a direct port from Japanese Battle Spirits. I'm not an expert on this, so like take everything I say right now with a grain of salt. But uh, from what I was reading, other people saying about this, apparently this card exists in Japanese Battle Spirits and actually is even more broken in Japanese Battle Spirits. So they like toned it down for the American or the Western version, Battle Spirits Saga. So maybe in their mind they just like took a card that already exists in Japanese Battle Spirits, made it slightly not as good, and in their mind they're like, oh, this will be perfectly fine, not realizing just for whatever reason, that they were also printing. Maybe they just weren't realizing that they were also printing the big Void Lord at the same time. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's a good point you just brought up, right? Like, yeah, Hurricane Highlands is still a really OP card, just with because the amount of ramp that you can get, and I think we discussed it on this channel plenty of times, right? Like, drawing is cool, but cores is what matter because you can have all the cards in the world, and if you have no cores to play those cards with, it's absolutely useless. But I think what makes Gale even more scary and more just such an uphill battle to defeat is that Void Lord, like. That Void Lord, it is insane for every level of its text. Like, there's not a single bad effect on that card. And, like when you and I were playtesting, the ability to summon two of that guy, like at that point, just scoop. Like, what, like, how do you get over that? Like, there's not enough card pool yet to really combat that, or not every deck has really viable, like, board wiping or anything like that. I mean, I know we got a couple cards now that, like Manaka, that automatically destroys a Void Lord. You have, I mean, hell, not even Nova because it's over. If you got them at 15K, you can't even pop them. So it's
Yeah,
just, I think that's what really makes that deck even more scary, just the ability of having that Warlord. I mean, along with, Prison Boots and all them other guys, but
yeah,
it's scary. It's scary for sure. I mean, you got Takawa. I mean, you can go on and on in days about how
yeah.
Gale's definitely going to be the odd top coming from set three, at least early on.
Well, you know what happened with Gale is it ended up being the perfect storm. That's what
Boom.
happened. I have that little drum in the sound, like the sound thing, but I missed it. I didn't use it. Sorry. But I appreciate you adding that in that
No, no
sound effect
problem. It
for our
wasn't as
listeners.
good, but we try it. We
um,
try it.
should we move on? Oh, hell yeah. Hell yeah. Thank you.
We're having fun here.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think we're going to have plenty of time in the coming months to talk about Gale quite a bit. Should we move on to our main topic today?
Yes.
All
It's an
right.
exciting one. I'm excited for this.
Yeah, I'm once again, I feel like I say this every time Cam isn't here. I'm once again so disappointed that Cam can't be here to talk about this because I feel like this would be really fun with him. But we finally have enough people listening to our podcast where we're getting people asking us questions.
Yeah.
Um,
Good
so
questions.
Great questions. Yeah. Which, by the way, if all right, so what we're doing today, we're doing a listener questions episode. So somebody asked a few questions in the Discord about just a few different things around like how best to play Battle Spirit Saga, like mulligans or when to be aggressive, that kind of thing. And I was like, oh, these are great questions. Also, you know what? I'm going to throw a little poll out there. If anybody else has any other questions they want to throw in, feel free. And we had a lot of people chime in. A lot of our like Discord regulars came to our rescue and provided us plenty of content for today.
Yeah.
So, with that said, if you would also like to ask us some questions, come join the Discord. I think, depending on how this episode goes, I think it's going to be fun. I think it'd be a lot of fun to do this every now and then. So I might make like a ask the podcast questions channel or something in there. Probably name it something a little more catchy than that. But
I think that's good. I said we talk about all the time. You guys join the Discord or wherever you're following us, and we want to make sure that you guys. The biggest thing is a community, and you guys are part of that community, which is kind of the voice as far as we talk about the shenanigans on here. But definitely, I think that's cool that you guys are getting involved and asking questions, and we'll definitely spotlight those questions on here, and we'll do like a segment about it because you guys are part of the team, and we're on this journey together and playing all the game that hopefully we're all still loving and having fun with. So I'm about it.
Hell yeah! So if you want to join the Discord and ask us some questions, there'll be a link in the description of the YouTube video if you're on there, or in the show notes if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. So let's jump right into it. I'm going to get started here. So I'm going to be using people's Discord names just so that we can tie them to our Discord members. So first and foremost, we've got, let me actually go over to the original question here. All right. So a member of our podcast, or a member of our Discord rather, Shorty, he goes by in Discord, said, good podcast, guys. Would love to hear an episode on when to go first or second, when to mulligan, and how aggressive you should be in the early turns. I find it really interesting in this game, balancing putting in the pressure to try to win and giving your opponent too many votes to work with in the early game. I think that's supposed to be cores. Too many cores to work. Yeah, too many cores to work with. Stupid autocorrect always does it to you. So it sounds like Shorty has a. They also provided some context here that they have like a Magic the Gathering background, which I do as well, and then you do a little bit too.
Yep.
And talking about how like pretty much you always want to be on the play in Magic, and how Battle Spirits is just a little bit different. So. There's kind of three different questions here. The first question, let's talk about this piece first, going first or second. So what is your philosophy for Battle Spirit Saga about going first or going second, Angel?
So mine is on a lot of different things. I would say the key components for me especially is knowing your deck. I mean, let's just start with that. You have to know your deck and what your deck wants to do. And a lot of that really happens with your opening hand, right? Once you open your hand, that ideally, if you know your deck and you know the limits, the outs, what it can do and cannot do based on turns and how fast you can kind of recover if you do, fall back a little bit, that's how you really decide. I mean, that's the one thing I like about this game where you can kind of look at your hand, you choose if you want to go first or second, and then you choose, if you want to mulligan or not. So I think that tells a lot about how much you understand your deck and really other decks, right? Because the next one I was going to talk about was the meta.
Yeah.
Know the meta. If you cannot go, and I'm talking about competitively, right? Like if you're playing casually, whatever, you just have fun with it. But if you're playing in a competitive setting, you have to know the meta. You cannot go into a competition. It can even be something as small as your local store championship without knowing what is relevant right there, because that's also going to influence your decision, right? You're going to know, like, all right, the meta right now is very aggro based. If your deck cannot handle aggro base, you probably want to go second, so they don't get that attack. So, but that's my philosophy. It really just starts with like knowing your deck, knowing what your deck can do, knowing what weaknesses your deck or matchups it has, And then understanding the meta, obviously not gonna know what your opponent's playing. Ideally, right? Maybe if you're in a big competition like Grand Open, you might, because people talk or walk around the tables. But ideally, you're not gonna know. So it's really just about understanding what your deck can do. And once you look at that quick glance of your hand, don't get greedy. You and I have talked about this before, even in real life playing. Like I've gotten greedy. Oh, I
Yeah.
can work myself out of this, and no, I cannot. Being a purple player, me having a opening hand of 5, 6 cost cards at a time, having depths, like depths could draw me cards, but it's not gonna protect me if I don't have any spirits, and I will lose matchups against aggro or decks that can go wide. So definitely don't get greedy. Know your limits. It's almost better start off slow and then work your way back up.
Yeah, that's all really great information. I think what makes this question so tricky is that there's so many factors, right?
Yep.
Like there's um if you're playing in a competitive event, it's best 2 out of 3. So if it's game 1 and you don't know what you're playing against, maybe you don't have enough information to really decide if what your opponent is playing should determine which order you go in. But if you're playing game 2 and you lost game 1 and now you get to pick, um, like you said, if they're playing aggro, make them go first. Don't give them that extra core. Don't give them that ability to attack you on their first turn. Also, the meta piece, one very specific card I'd like to call out because it influences whether or not I go first all the time is Worker Ant-Man. Worker Ant-Man is prevalent in most competitive decks. I would say you see him, like, even if it's not a green deck, they'll usually throw in like 4 Worker Ant-Man, 4 Thorn Prison, just as like a. I just
Yeah,
assume that
it's staple.
I just assume that every deck has 4 Worker Ant-Man, 4 Thorn Prison, until proven otherwise. um, and he needs 3 cores to play him, and then he needs a soul core and a regular core on him to swing in and then give you another core. So if you're going first, Worker Ant-Man does nothing. If you're going second, Worker Ant-Man pops off and gives you a huge advantage over your opponent. Because not only if you're going second do you get that extra core, with Worker Ant-Man you get another core. So you're 2 cores ahead. So while your opponent is on 5 cores when they start their next turn, you're on 7. So huge advantage there. There's also cards like Mushrantula, which I use pretty frequently in my green decks, where if I have it in my opening hand, I like to go first because I can play it on turn 1, have them discard a card, and I know that they're not going to have a Star Blast draw set to trigger off of the Mushrantula summon. So it's kind of a win-win. And on top of that, if my opponent mulliganed and they went to 4 with their mulligan, I drop Mushrantula and they have to discard another card. They're starting the game off with 3 cards and then drawing one. So it's like, it's pretty brutal.
Yeah, no, it really is. I mean, and you said this one thing I forgot to mention about like, and I think it goes back to like knowing how to pilot your deck, right? Just thinking about Shorty's question, like I know he had asked like when to mulligan. It
Hmm.
really depends, right? Because and it falls back once again with the meta, right? Because I'm just thinking the scenario. All right, you draw, you have a Star Bless in hand. Let's just say maybe one high cost spirit and maybe a couple nexus, right? Ideally, you want to have some sort of low curve spirits so you can kind of block and have chip damage for it. Either way, whatever you're trying to play. But once again, if you know the meta, it's a lot of win summon effects. Maybe your game plan is to go first, right? You set the Star Blast, like you were saying, Eric, and
Hmm.
then you punish your opponent because they summon Mushrantula. Cool, discard 1, but now draw 2, possibly 4 off it
Yep.
if I have to course for it. Um, so, like, in a way to answer Shorty's question, like, when to mulligan, it's really based on, well, one, who you're like, if game 1 you're not gonna know, but game 2, if you know what you're playing, just know what your opponent's trying to do. But 3, what is your end goal for your deck? Like, what are you trying to pilot as quickly as possible to get to? If you want, like for my example, purple, right? I want as many cores as possible if I can summon my high spirits. So I usually try to go second to get that extra core. I usually try to take 2 to 3 life as long as I have an absolute ice shield, right? And I feel comfortable doing that just so I can ramp up because that way I could turn the tide, the next couple rounds, and then maybe my opponent's kind of like 2 behind now to catch up to me. But that's also scary because if you're playing an aggro-based meta, you taking those 2, 3 lives, playing Arcana Joker or 2 Arcana Jokers, or now you're screwed. So, mulliganing is one of these things about this game where I know he said it kind of feels like a disadvantage, and yes, it absolutely is, right? You never want a mulligan because you lose the draw, and then you get punished like people by Eric to summon the damn spider, you know. So it is a disadvantage, but at the same time, it can also be an advantage because if your opponent did not mulligan because they got greedy or they think they can work their way out of it, and you decided to mulligan, and now you have a lot of low end curve, you might be going off a lot quicker, even though you're giving them ramp by attacking their life. And this has happened to me at the Grand Open where I was pushing against white. And yes, I was giving them a lot of cores, and they can summon some of the elephant, all these other things. But guess what? Now they only have 2 or 1 life, where absolute ice shield is probably useless in the burst. And now they have to protect their life every single turn because anything that you can do, if you throw in prison, whatever, dream bomb, whatever it is, all you need is one more chip of damage to win, and you definitely control the state because now your opponent has that pressure the rest of the game.
Yeah, I that makes a lot of sense. I think kind of the interesting point that I hear you coming to is that going first, going second, and mulligan are very closely tied together.
Yeah,
There's a lot to think about both of those things. Um, and I think what it comes down to is really being comfortable with and knowing your deck and knowing what your deck wants to do in the early game. Uh, if your deck wants to ramp in the early game or wants to be super aggressive in the early game, you want to know, okay, when I open my hand, if I get like, let's say you want to be super aggressive early game. You open your hand, you get an ice shield in your opening hand. You get ice shield, star blessed draw, um, thorn prison, and no spirit, like some other magic, right? That's not a hand you want to keep for an aggressive deck. Um, so you're going to mulligan. And because you know that you have Worker Ant-Man in your deck, and that's who you want to see to be able to recover from mulliganing, you go ahead and say, I'm going to go second. So that way, when you shuffle your hand back in, you redraw your 4. Hopefully, you have something good that you can go off of there. Or if not, now you're getting that extra core, and you have a little bit more to work with since you're down a card. So there's and that example is not like a tried and true example. You can't like do that, for every single deck ever. That's just like an example with a very specific deck. So you have to know your deck and what your deck's trying to do in order to make those sorts of decisions. And the only way to really do it is honestly just, if you have no idea when to mulligan or no idea when to go first or go second, just play lots of games with your deck and just try both. See how your deck does when you go second. Does it slow down too much? Does it seem to hit its stride? See how your deck does when you're down a card, or like if you think you should mulligan, just go for it and see how it does. You got to try all this stuff when you're just playing casual matches with your friends. So that way, when you make it out to your store tournament or your grand opens, you're ready to go. You know what you're mulliganing for. You know that your deck likes to go second or that your deck likes to go first. That's kind of, I know it's kind of a non-answer because it doesn't give you like a always go second and never mulligan. Like, I know that that's like the answer everybody wants is like something very straightforward, but unfortunately it is complicated.
yeah, it's really not. Like, I mean, it's a good rule of thumb. It's just me. I'm not telling anybody to play like this. This is what I do. A good rule of thumb, and really, it's in any game. Coming from Yu-Gi-Oh, even a little bit of Magic that I play, is you always want to have your opening hand to be a variety and diversity, right? You want to have maybe a few spirits, at least a magic or two, and maybe a nexus or whatever is whatever your deck is that does. You don't ever want to have, because I've had hands with just full spirits, and you're like, oh, this is great. Well, it's not. It's cool because you have spirits you can summon, but if you're getting tapped down every single turn by Thorn Prisons or green exhausting everything, then your spirits are useless, and now you have no magic cards in your hand to protect the extra protection you need, or vice versa.
Yeah.
You have a bunch of spirits and no nexuses to help fuel one of each other. I could use yellow as an example, right? Yellow has a lot of low cost spirits that they have decent effects, but without Blessed Cathedral or Phantasmal Parrot to be able to like gain an extra ramp or draw or resource off it to keep fueling that deck, it's useless. So I would just look at your opening hand and make sure you have enough outs or enough things to do with that hand. You can summon a spirit. If that spirit happens to get destroyed for whatever reason, you have, whatever it might be, an absolute ice shield or maybe a star blast if you need to draw into something else. a daily, whatever style of deck you're playing. Obviously, different colors do different things. And the biggest thing too, kind of to go back on that first or second, it's really all situational, right? Because sometimes I go first just because I want that cost reduction early on for turn two.
Yeah.
So it's really, like you said, it's a very complicated answer, and it's really also about what your play style is, right? And what your deck play style is, because it really, you have to, like, the biggest thing I can give anybody advice on is just you have to know your deck, know the ins and out, and that's where you can kind of stay calm and collective. Because if you feel that pressure, then that means you probably don't know what your deck can get you out of. And you'd
Mhm.
be surprised what you can do, as long as you understand your deck and know how to pilot it. So I think the joke I make with Eric all the time is like, you can net deck all you want, but if you do not know how to truly pilot that deck or understand it, you're not going to do as good as somebody that either created it or has played with it long enough, because they know what translates to what, or what synergy is supposed to do well. It's usually not the obvious answer either. I think we were playtesting the other day, and they go, "Oh, I can see how this can kind of go off with this nexus." I'm like, "Yeah," because most people are not even thinking about that, but it does translate to that. So just kind of practice, lots of practice. Look at your hand and just make the best educated guess for what you're trying to do that game for sure.
I totally agree. Being comfortable with your deck and knowing how to pilot it is huge. I think a perfect example is there's a Nemesis deck created by Jacob Snodgrass that I actually played against this deck at the Tulsa Grand Open. Not in an official match, it was just for fun. And it was a close game. It was really good. But I loved his deck and the way that it was playing against mine. And so when we got back from the Grand Open, I was like, oh, I want to try this. Like, I want to try and pilot it. And then when I piloted it, it was like a hot pile of garbage for me. And let's be clear, this deck got top four at the Tulsa Grand Open. So it's obviously a good deck, right? It's just the way that I play and the way that I am used to playing my decks. I just couldn't pilot it. I wasn't a good pilot for this Nemesis deck. So it's obviously like a good deck, but because of the way that I typically think about things and the way that I typically like to play, it just wasn't really working for me. And with that said, like I could put in the time and the effort and learn how to pilot it, but like you were saying, Angel, with net decking, right? Like I could do that and take it to a tournament and maybe do decently well with it, although I'd have to change some cards out because it does contain Netherworld Depths. But um, the problem with that is just the amount of time it's going to take. So if I want to go to the Pro Tour and I only have 2 weeks to prepare, probably not a good pick for me because I'm going to have to learn this entirely new strategy, this entirely new deck. And so I'm going to stick to what I know and then be able to make those decisions at the very start of the game with only 4 cards in my hand to know how my deck is doing, what I could potentially draw into, what I'm going to play turn 1, what I'm going to play turn 2, what I'm going to play turn 3 if the thing I played on turn 1 is now dead. So yeah, it really does come down to the best way to learn how to do these things is just to play a lot of games. That's kind of how I feel about it in summary. One thing that I think would be interesting to talk about really quick is just the with mulliganing and with going first versus going second. How strong do you think it is to have that extra card or that extra core? Like, how much do you think that influences a game? Because I do think there is like a almost like a statistical element to this as well.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious answer would be a lot, right? Any game, especially in the game right now, where some decks struggle to have I'm removing myself from being a purple player. Like decks that struggle to have draw cards early on, like being down 1 card just because you open crappy, it hurts. It absolutely hurts. That's you're basically feeling already like you're behind the 8 ball. And same thing with the core, right? On a game that's absolutely based on you can do X amount based on X cores, it sucks, right? So I think it is a big deal, um, because you never, who doesn't want to draw cards? And in any game, I mean, I could talk about any game. It could be Marvel Snap, Hearthstone, Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh, drawing cards. We need drawing cards. Like that is something that you're never gonna like. Oh, I don't want to draw cards right now, unless you're about to deck out. Like
Yeah.
drawing cards is a powerful tool. So anybody that tells you, oh, it's not a big, it is a big deal. And same thing with this game in Battle Spirits, specifically, right? Course, I compared to Hearthstone with mana. Like the more mana you have, the more you can go off, and the more you can kind of like put pressure. So I think it is a big deal, but I think that kind of falls back, like I said, like we were talking about. It is a big deal, but it's also not that big a deal if you know that you can take a hit on a card or skip going second on getting that extra core because you know what your deck can do, or based on your hand what you maybe have a working Ant-Man, right? So it's not that big a deal. Or you maybe you have Emmer and Ant-Man or whatever cards you have to help you ramp. That going second doesn't matter because this other option is a lot more beneficial for you in the long run, right? It might be a set Star Blast or whatever burst effect you might get on one summon that might be better for you. So to answer your question, I mean it's a big deal, but it ain't something that I would say, oh my god, I can't do anything because I lost a card because I had a mulligan or because I went first. One core does not matter because the one thing I love about this game is your life is your core, right? So even if you don't get
Yeah.
that core stat, guess what? Like I do as purple player before like green even came out. I mean Eric and Cam know this. Before green even came out as a purple player, I was always going down to at least 3 life, if not two at the most. Because
Yeah.
your life is your ramp. So in a way you can always turn the table back on that. But once again though, right? Know the meta because I'm not about to go down to two when I know Arcana Joker is a thing, or pretty soon we're gonna have double damage with a double heart. Uh, that's putting yourself in a dangerous situation. But yeah, definitely, I would just say it's a big deal in any game. But I think that for sure, it's just a matter of what your game plan is and what your strategy is going into the game and your confidence level. And you made a good point. We're talking about the piloting. I joke about it like cars, right? I could have a Lamborghini right now, right? I don't, but if I did, I could have a Lamborghini, right? And I'm driving it. I think I'm driving fast as hell. And then I have a race car driver push that car to its limits because they know how to pilot that machine. It's the same way with a deck. I played against a lot of purple, white players because I was the best deck in the meta that I just slapped because they did not know how to pilot the deck very well or they were making misplays. So I think, being a skillful player and understanding your deck, it does not matter if you lose a draw, it does not matter, if your opponent plays Tarantula or whatever, makes you discard a card, just know it. I'm usually when Eric plays that, I'm like, cool, I'll discard Belgor, I'll discard Bishop because I don't need this right now. It's usually a pretty quick decision because I know what my deck can do and how it can get out of those situations.
Yeah. Well, I think that covers most of that. There was like one more piece, right, to that question.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. Let me see.
How aggressive to be in the early turns?
Yeah.
So yeah, you want to talk about that a little bit? Like, how do you balance aggression and defense when you're playing?
So, you guys are gonna hate me for this, but same thing, right? It really depends on your hand. It depends on your hand, right? Because I mean, there are games, at least in playtesting against Eric, where I'll go more aggro than anything, and my deck's not aggro at all. I'm more of a mid-range control. But if my opening hand or the cards that I'm drawing are making my playstyle be more aggro, then that's what I'm gonna go with, right? Because I know I have more tools to go aggro than wait the long game. Now, vice versa, if the cards I draw in my opening hand or what I'm got into are more of a mid-range playstyle, then I'm not gonna be as aggressive because I don't have that backup by me tapping down my spirits because I have no
Hmm.
way to come back if you turn the tide on me. So it's really about once again just what cards are you dealt with? That cliche saying, you do with the cards you dealt with. Same thing, right? So if you can go aggro and you have like two absolute ice shields in hand, absolutely, right? Because you're putting pressure to your opponent. You have 2 turns back to back that you can stop the battle phase if they happen to try to swing back at you, or whatever, maybe take some just to get some more ramp and even go more aggro next turn. But at the same time, though, if you open up with just like 1 or 2 spirits and nexus and one absolute ice shield, then you probably want to play the long game as much as you can. Um, and it's just a balancing thing. It goes back to everything we're just talking about. Based on if you're going game two, you kind of know what your opponent's playing. So obviously, based on their deck, if that matchup is not favorable for your deck, then you probably want to slow it down, right? You don't want to ramp them up. Or knowing the meta, if everybody's playing green you know they're gonna exhaust your spirits anyways, then just go ahead and attack it because that way they're useful.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times with Eric before, I was not attacking, but then he was always tapping down my spirits anyways, and I would think back, oh, what a waste. I could have just attacked. That way, either I'm inflicting life, or I'm making maybe having to crash the spirits into mine. And a lot of
Yeah.
times that helps out because when I get down Eric to one life, guess what? I summon Maduke. Well, now that blood curse is really gonna sting, you know.
Freaking Maduke.
Good Maduke. So I think it's just really based, on what cards you have. I definitely think there's a balance to it, like Shorty was kind of calling out. Like you don't want to go too aggressive if that's not what your deck wants to do. I know you don't want to close out the game, but I've won games with only one life, because people, and I think you have too against me, Eric, where I went
Yeah.
too aggressive, and then your opponent had a lot more answers than you thought, or they baited you into whatever, an absolute or a starbless draw, and now those four cards they picked up, or vice versa. Eric did it to me the other day where I baited him out with a starbless, and I drew into absolute ice shield, and I
Yep.
turned the tables on him. So it's just really based on, once again, guys, just like just understanding what you have in your hand. Don't go crazy aggressive if you don't have anything to protect yourself for a couple turns. But at the same time, just know what deck you're playing against or what your opponent's play style is. If there's somebody that's confident that's going to keep pushing for damage no matter what, then you have nothing to lose at that point because you waiting on them to be scared. They're going to tap you down and still push for damage either way. So, what do
I'm
you think
think
on that?
I'm thinking I totally agree with everything you just said. It's very dependent on the game state and it's very dependent on your matchup. I know that Shorty's question was specifically about the early game, so I'll tackle that really quickly first. It's the same thing with going first or going second. You want to be careful about how many resources you give to your opponent when you hit them. And this is the thing I love about Battle Spirits, or one of the things I love about Battle Spirits, is that when you take damage, you get resources to do things with. So I can think of a very specific example of a game I was playing against you, Angel, very recently, where I had a board state where most of my creatures or most of my spirits only had like one core on them. And I counted your cores and realized that if I dealt one more damage, you could summon Curse Dragon and it would fuck up my day. So even though I had the resources to attack you, I held back. Because in my head, I'm thinking I'm playing purple. My spirits have one core each on them right now. Very vulnerable state to be at against a purple deck. I don't want to I don't want to way overextend here. Maybe I could get Angel down to 2 instead of being down to 3. But is that one extra life damage really worth Angel wiping my board and ramping like 4 cores? I don't think so. So another example I can think of is I was playing against, I think, your Nova deck that we've been like kind of play testing with.
Yeah.
You had a spirit with confront, and it's kind of like you were just saying about me exhausting your stuff, so you might as well attack. Well, if I leave something open and you have a confront spirit, I'm going to be forced to block it, so I might as well just swing in. Unless I really need to block it to not die, I should probably just swing in anyways, because that spirit's just going to get gobbled up by your Star Dragon. So it's definitely dependent, but I do think there are some things you can consider as you're attacking into your opponent is how many cores do I want to give them to then retaliate with. So
Yep.
If you can get somebody one place, I'll say this, and I'd love to hear what you think about this, Angel. If I see an opportunity to get someone from 2 cores, like 2 life cores down to 1 life core, I almost always take it, even if it's a little risky. And the reason, and I play a very aggressive play style most of the time, so I'm talking about specifically with like my aggro decks, but if you can get someone down to 1 core, that means they can no longer set the absolute ice shield. They now have to play with the ice shield out of hand. And that is it's just a huge game changer. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. Like, I mean, I'm by no means an aggro player, but if I need to play aggressively, I will. And to that point, and I think I brought it up earlier, like, if you can get your opponent down to 1 life, do it. If it's not going to cost you the game, let me just say that.
Oh yeah,
If it's
obviously.
not going to cost you the game because you have whatever, an ice shield or something to protect yourself, and you can take you can sacrifice a spirit later on. Whatever you need to do to get your opponent down to 1 life, take it, because there's a lot of decks that you can kind of come back and win because your opponent has 1 life. I mean, to the
Yep.
point of you have Elk and White. I talked about Blood Curse and Maduke. I've even won games where like my opponent attacks, I purposely block with a 4 or 5 cost spirit. They forgot I had Belgor, or sometimes 2 Belgors, and now I have 2 more spirits to kind of push in for the last bit of damage, or vice versa, right?
Yep.
They keep, they might have a big spirit that went tall. They have a huge spirit with BP. Uh, they have 1 life. You can Thorn Prison that, Dream Bomb, and tap it down. You're good, And Absolute Ice Shield is absolutely, it's funny. It's absolutely useless. And in this scenario, you were hoping to block because once you block and then you flash an Absolute Ice Shield, then you can end the battle phase. But if your creature's tapped down and you only have 1 life, it doesn't matter that you activate Absolute Ice Shield. That damage still goes through, so you lose that life.
Yep.
So once again, if you can get your opponent down to 1 life, you're really putting the pressure. And I was reading
Yep.
back at Shorty's comment about, I guess he was playing a super aggro Terry deck, and then he had his opponent down to 1 life on turns 3 and 4, but then was punished for it. I mean, it's a lot of scenarios we can talk about. I'm not there, so I don't know what deck you're playing against or what the rest of your hand looked like. But I played Pterosaurus when it first came out, and that's happened to me where like, oh, cool, I got this, I can go wide, and you push. But if you don't have enough, the thing about Terry that I noticed, they didn't have enough magic cards to really support the defensive game, right? It's more, and that's what
Yeah.
aggro is. I mean, push, push, push. So
Yep.
maybe in that scenario, Shorty, I would have looked at like kind of the stuff that we talked about, right? If you knew you didn't have something to protect your life or an absolute ice shield or something to hold out that aggression, I would have kept a couple spirits up, because if your opponent's playing, like just say against me, because I'm beating a lot of Terrys. They go super crazy, cool, bring me down to 1, 2 life. I'm a purple player, right? You just gave me all those frames like you were stating in the Discord. Now I can summon whatever, Maduke, Backlist, and Curse, whatever it might be, completely board wipe you. And I can't tell you how many Pterosaurs I scoop when I see like they'll ask me, "You're about to do Curse?" I'm like, "Yeah, all right, let's go to game 2," because there's nothing
Yeah.
else, right? So
Yeah.
in that scenario, it kind of goes back to a lot of stuff that we touched upon, where like just know your deck, know what you're playing against. Look at your hand, right? Like don't go super aggressive. I know aggro wants to end the game and close out the game early, but if you don't have anything to protect yourself, because the thing about aggro that I've noticed the struggles with, and me and Eric were talking about this, like if you get into the mid range long game, they struggle a lot,
Yeah.
right? They're very struggle a lot because now your little spirits are not really doing much. There's usually not a lot of effects that go hand in hand with it, and your opponent now has these other synergy cards with magics and nexuses and blah blah blah. Especially in the meta now with set 3 coming out, that it's more like mid game, late game state looks like, with a lot of like nexuses and control and all that. So definitely aggro should be interesting with that aspect. But it just goes back to that. Just make sure that protect yourself, make sure you have something. And if you can push your opponent down to 1 life without screwing yourself, absolutely do it, because it's just something we haven't even talked about yet. But overtime, right? If you
Yeah.
somehow make it overtime, your opponent has way less life than you, so that's usually the win. If you can somehow stall, right?
Yeah.
If you can stall long enough, just by you getting them 1 life, you've already in a way won. If you're in game 3 and you have to go into overtime, that's the first tiebreaker. So definitely, if you can have that chance, do it, because there's been times where I haven't taken a chance, and I'm like, oh man, if I would have done it, I could have done these 2 things, and I could have actually won. But now I'm getting Thorn Prison, and the last damage doesn't get through. So definitely get him down if you can.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think it's kind of the crux of this is like Shorty pointed out, in Magic the Gathering you always want to take chip damage at your opponent whenever you can, but in this game there are these weird like thresholds where like making your opponent like go from 5 to 4, not that big of a deal, they have an extra core or whatever. Making them go from like 5 to 2, and they still have 2, so they could still ice shield, like man, you just gave them 3 cores to retaliate with on their next turn. So yeah, and I think the overtime thing is a very good point too, is just be mindful of, if you are playing in a competitive event, like how much time do I have left, because I think it'll really influence your strategy. Because if you're up like 2 or 3 cores and you're about to hit overtime, maybe you just don't swing in. Like you don't have to finish your opponent, you just need to survive. Like if
Mm-hmm.
if you're at 5 cores and they're at 2, Like, you just need to survive those last 3 turns once overtime is called. I mean, obviously go for the win if it's there. If like you have, lethal on board, just like go in and finish the game. But if it's going to be a struggle, or it's going to put you in a position where you might then drop down to 1, and now when it goes to overtime you lose, that's not good.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, like for everyone listening, look, I had the exact same issues. Probably what Shorty's going through when I first got into this game, because we usually play a lot of other card games. He's absolutely right. Like I played Magic, and Magic you have 20 life, right?
Mm.
And I've been down to 1, and I think I was playing like a white mono deck, and I got my life back up to like 40. Like Magic, there's so much interaction, and the creatures do this if this equals that or X of that. You have a lot more interaction between your opponent's turn. Um, where this game, I think that's where like the niche of this game is one, at least right now, with the exception of Bless, you don't have a way to really bring your life back up at all. At least not to the extent that you can in Magic and other games. Two, there's really you only have 2 windows of interaction. That is the flash step when the attack is declared, and then the flash step during the block. So
Yeah.
you don't have these cards where like Magic. All right, I'm gonna activate this. All right, now I'm gonna activate this and this and this, and it just starts stacking, and you have like 30 cards in play right now, and it just resolves. Where this is like every decision matters, and really the flash timing. That's one thing that could be a subject for another day, but flash timing in this game is so crucial. And I think me and Eric have even realized that how even more crucial it was just play testing for the Pro Tour.
Yeah.
If I flash in something way too early, and I think it happened to me last night, I think it was like I flashed it in way too early. And the moment I did it, I knew I messed up because then
Yeah.
you flashed in Leaf Wolf, and I'm like, oh goddamn, if I would have waited just under my block or after you flash in. So
I think it
learn
was
your flash timing.
I think it was a thorn prison. I think you thorn prisoned
That's what it was.
one of my spirits, and then after you thorn prisoned, I played Leaf Wolf.
Yep.
And so if that had just been the other way around, I wouldn't have won.
Yep. So flash timing in this game is really crucial. So I get it, especially new players to Battle Spirit. I struggle with the like how to use life as resource. I think we all did. I think Cam and Eric and I were all talking about it. Man, it's just so hard to. I think it's one of the toughest decisions when you first get into this game. It's how to manage your cores and to what extent do you use your life as your management without shooting yourself in the foot. Compared to other games, and I think that's by no means is this game hard or complex for sure, right? Magic is in a whole different level, so don't shoot me down. I'm not saying it is, but I'm saying in those little niche moments that the Battle Spirit has, it's what makes it very different from other games where you don't have the ability to just come back from almost dying and you have 40 life again, like I've done in Magic, like I said. So,
well, awesome. I think that just about does it for all of Shorty's questions. Thank you so much for submitting those, by the way. It inspired today's podcast episode it inspired the subject for today's podcast episode. So super fun. Shout out to you, Shorty. Thanks for posting that.
Yes. Very good questions, Shorty. Very good questions.
Hopefully we answered them. I feel like a lot of it's tough because it's like it's such a nuanced conversation, and it is one of those things where you mentioned it, like in the pterosaur example that Shorty gave, like that they were playing against pterosaurs. Like you almost need to ask a couple more questions to really understand, like, okay, what was the board state? Or if you had been there to see the match, you could have had like a discussion afterwards. And there are so many factors in this game. There's cost reduction. There's you get a core every single turn. So how do you factor that in? You have like your curve in your deck, which people are maybe familiar with if they've played Magic. People always talk about mana curve, but I'm not going to get into that because I think that's a whole other subject that would be interesting to talk about. But there's so many factors that play into all of those things, and that's what makes it difficult to answer those questions. But hopefully that our rambling helped.
Hopefully.
So we have Sad Mango from our Discord, who also asked a couple of questions, but I'm going to start with this one because it's kind of related to what we were just talking about. What helps dictate when a card is a 1 of, 2 of, or 3 of, or even a 4 of, like a full play set when you're deck building? So you want to start us off talking about that?
Sure. We're gonna name this this podcast episode is what Angel said before. So once again, I think it really falls. Great question, by the way, Sam Mango. And I think I hit you up on Discord today. I'm still gonna get you your book, no worries. But once again, what does your deck want to do? What do you want to do with your deck? And that's all. To answer that question, as simple as that, right? What does your deck struggle with that you need to play 3 of if you really need it? An example, without giving too much info out because the Pro Tour's coming up, but there's a Nexus I got in my deck where I have played with it with 3, 2, and 4. Currently I'm at 4. Why? Because I need more of what that Nexus does for my deck to really push my deck through. Um, Same thing with some of the Magic cards that I have. I bounced the idea with 2, 3. So what really dictates what is that is playing and seeing what your deck is missing, right? That is a huge thing, right? Because you can think you have Theorycraft, all it's gonna be amazing for us, and sometimes it's just too clunky. It's very clunky. I mean, I think in one of my initial versions of my deck, I took out Worker Ant-Man because I was like, man, he just feels slow, and then you would be like, what? He allows you to ramp, and that's a whole different conversation. But for what my deck was trying to do for the build that I had, Worker Ant-Man was not a 4 of, right, at all. So
Yeah.
I think to answer that question is really, once again, is one, what are you trying to do with your deck that you need to see 4 copies of, right? If it's an early on game, if you're aggro, you probably want to play 4 of a lot of lower cost spirits because you're trying to see those to push. If you're more mid range, you probably want to play like 3 or 4 of like magic cards, like Absolute Ice Shield or things to kind of stall the game so you don't die pretty quickly. And it's really too based on what you want to do with the deck. Because I mean, you can have a debate where like, oh, you should play, and I've heard it right amongst purple players. You should play 3 Maduke, or you should play 4 Madukes, or you should always have Bacillus and Curse Dragon. I mean, I could get this out because during I think it was Tulsa, the Grand Open, I had 3 Curse Dragons and only 2 Bacillus, and everybody always asked me, why do you play 3 with 2 Bacillus, not just 2 and 2? And my answer to them was simple, right? Usually your opponent's not going to expect a Cursed Dragon without a backless combo going off.
Yeah.
And I will catch so many people off guard, especially the aggro players, the Pterosaurs, the green aggros that I played, because, I would just summon a Cursed Dragon. Now it's just ramped up, and I still have my board wipe when I need it. And that's just a decision that I made based on my playstyle, based on the meta, based on what I thought I was going to see. And it paid off in the long run. I ended up doing very well, and that was I think helped me out during Gen Con too. And I ended up winning one of the days because of that, because I felt like Curse of Dragon should have been at 3 for what I was trying to do with my deck, or what my deck wanted to do, or whatever
Yeah.
loophole I knew wasn't going to be there. So once again, just one of those questions where like there's not a right or wrong answer, and you don't let anybody else tell you, oh no, you should do this. Everybody's gonna have opinions, right? We're all very big players. We all have our own opinions. I think it should be based on what your deck's trying to do, or what do you feel your deck struggles with that you need more copies of a certain card, or maybe something to help you elevate and push you to that longer game. Maybe you got to ramp up quickly. So that'd be the sort of easy answer I would give.
Well, Sad Mingo, I'm here to say, don't listen to him. I'm going to tell you what to do. You're going to want 4 of. I'm just kidding.
four of everything.
4 of everything. If it's not good enough for 4, it's not good enough to be in your deck. I'm just kidding. Although, so I'm joking, but I've played Magic for a long time. I started with Magic the Gathering in 2008 during the Lorwyn block. That was when I started playing Magic. And a very, very good player, I asked him for some deck building advice, and he told me something that stuck with me, but also gave me some bad deck building habits, I think, in the long run, because I took it with me throughout all these years, and I think the game has evolved. And then also I've applied it to other card games, and I don't think it's necessarily true. He told me that every card in your deck should either be a 4 of or a 1 of. And his analysis there or his reasoning was that if it's a card that is like the core center of your deck, like doing what your deck wants to do, it should be a 4 of. If it's a card that's in there to deal with something in the meta or some sort of like, tech against something it's that you might see, it's going to be a 1 of, because you want to like see it occasionally or see it just when you need it. And I do think there is some truth to this. And I will say that this is still stuck with me to this day. Whenever I'm building decks for any card game, I typically think of it first in these terms, where it's like, okay, what is my deck trying to do? I'm going to put 4 of all those cards in. And then what are some like tech cards I want to deal with things? I'll put 1 of those in. But I've evolved past this at this point where now I have a better understanding of this strategy. And I'd say that where it actually falls for me is more like this. So 4 ofs or play sets, if you're playing a game that doesn't use 4 copies of a card as a play set, I think that what I initially said still stands. Those are going to be your cards that are doing what your deck wants to be doing. What your deck is focused on doing, you should have the full play sets of those cards. And the way that I think about it is these are cards I want to see on turn 1, 2, or 3. Like I want to see them in the early game. I want to see them whenever I can see them. I want to see them. That's typically how I think about those. Then I think of 3 ofs, and 3 ofs are cards that maybe I don't necessarily need to see in the early game, or if I do see them in the early game, I really only need to see like 1 of them. And then 2 ofs I think of as cards that are like mid to late game. I want to be able to see this because it's going to be like my finisher or going to get me out of a sticky situation. And then the 1 ofs are really still kind of stands like those kind of tech cards that maybe are in there for a very situational thing that maybe I want to get out of a weird situation that I might see myself in pretty frequently, not frequently enough to warrant like a 2 or 3 of, but enough to include it. So that's kind of my philosophy on that. Is I would think of it as like, how often do I want to see this card? And also I will say, if you're testing a new card in your deck, put more in than less, and then cut it back as you're play testing, because you in order to truly test it in your deck, you need to see it. And in order to know how many should be in your deck, you need to see it all the time and see if it works or what it does, and then try and see it maybe like less often and see if it improves. And then if you go all the way down to 1 of, and even when you draw it as a 1 of, you're disappointed to see it in your hand, okay, it's probably time to cut it out of the deck. It doesn't really fit in your deck. So those are all of my thoughts around that. What do you think, Angel? Am I way off base on anything there, or what do you think?
No, I mean, look, we all have our opinions. The only thing I would be that I don't do, and I don't want to say that I disagree, but I would not do, it was the card. Like, you should never, how do I say this? Like, you should never build a deck with tech cards for things that you might encounter that do not help still push your deck forward, right? Like,
yeah,
because to me, that is what the sideboard's for, right? Because there's nothing worse, and kind of back to Shorty's point, right? If I have to mulligan, let's just say game 2 or whatever, let's just say game 1, right? If I mulligan and the cards I'm drawing are tech cards that you probably even know if you've been playing against that deck, automatically you're not just mulliganing, you're mulliganing. Basically, those cards don't exist in your deck anymore, because even if you draw them later on, they're going to be completely useless for you because you're going in blind. I only play tech cards that still help my deck in one form or fashion, right? Like, it either I can also do BP increase, or I can move course around, because to me that's really where sideboard and sideboard tech, and a lot of, I think, good players end up winning games because they sideboarded correctly the right tech cards, where you're now not having to draw cards. Because I used to be bad about that too, just coming from Yu-Gi-Oh, right? Like, I will put tech cards in there thinking I'm gonna see this deck, and I've never played against that deck one time. So going into game 1 and losing game 1, because instead of seeing, I'm just use Battle Spirits we're talking about, instead of seeing whatever Curse of Dragon, I draw a Feral Slash or something like that.
Yeah,
it breaks your heart, right? Like, that could have been something else that could have elevated my deck. So now that you're wrong, I mean, absolutely, it can work depending on what, once again, what the meta is, or what you've seen a lot of, or what your play style is. It's not a right or wrong answer. It's just me personally, like, very niche tech cards that are specific to counter certain things, I always just put in my sideboard, because to me that's what it's for, right? That's why you play your best 2 out of 3. Because I'd rather have cards that will elevate my deck and hopefully just help me win game 1, than just try to have dead cards in my hand that I'm playing, let's say counter green, but I'm playing a white deck. Those are all useless. They're useless draws, and you're really going to lose the game because now you have basically a dead hand. So,
yeah. I think one reason I still feel that way, or why I still build that way, is like, thinking about Magic, like I mostly play best of 1 Magic. So it's like, I don't
Yeah.
have a sideboard. Or if we do go to a store tournament or something for Battle Spirits, it'll probably be best of one. So I think that actually brings up a good point, is that what format are you playing in? Like if you're playing at like these high level events, it's going to be best 2 of 3. So to your point, you can have more of those 4 ofs. You can like those cards that really push your deck in the direction it wants to go all in, and then
Yep.
have those like your dream bomb for dealing with Maduke in your sideboard, because you may not see Maduke. What happens if you put and here's where definitely agreeing with you on that, is like, what if Dream Bomb is my deck specifically to deal with Maduke, and then I don't play against purple all day? Or like I don't play against any deck where it ends, like maybe I play against aggro all day, and it's like, okay, this 5 cost Dream Bomb is not really worth bouncing the Moth Butterfly to their hand.
Yep. Yep. And like I said,
Um,
I mean, I think we talked about it one time. Like, keep in mind, this game, you can sideboard your whole. I mean, you can put your whole sideboard in your deck as long as you don't go over 60 cards. So to kind of tie in both things with Sam Mango, like you can only maybe play 2, and you kind of just touch 2 in your main deck and have 2 more in your sideboard, and you felt like, man, I really wish I could have seen more of whatever this Darklands or whatever. Just put it in, and you
yep,
don't have to
yep,
take anything out whatsoever. Your opponent doesn't need that. It's not like other games where like, oh, I'm setting out 5, putting in 5, whatever. It just be, hey, I'm gonna put all 10 cards into my deck as long as I'm not over 60, and now you have 4 copies, 3 copies, or whatever you're trying to do. But it's really based, I think, to make the initial decision is what your deck struggles with, or what is, and I do agree with that, what you had said in that guy told you, where like whoever your main staple is, in a way, you kind of want to see more of. I would just be very careful with that, right? Because once again, it's about low curve to long curve. Like, I would love to play 4 Madukes, but the last thing I want to see is,
yep,
opening hand, a Maduke, a Cursed Dragon, a Baculus, a Belgor, and whatever else. Because this has, it happens because I have so many high cost cards that doesn't matter that they have powerful effects. It's a reason why they cost so much. And yeah, there's cost reduction in this game that helps with that a little bit. But my deck is not set up to go wide and get this much cost reduction. So I would just be very careful, because I would say Maduke is like my staple of most of my purple decks. But I don't think I've ever have played 4 of her. I think I've always done 3, and I've done 1 in my sideboard in case for whatever reason I do want to see more. But
yeah,
now that there's cards that, you can recurse stuff from the graveyard, then it's not a big a deal if I only play
mm,
2. You destroy it, cool. I can get it back with Impaler Forest or something like that. So just think about the card pool as well, right? Like, if you have to decide, oh, I want to see a lot of this, cool. But if there's another way you can get him out for free or a lot cheaper, like you got cards like, I'm just talking about purple right now, but like Reanimate, stuff like that, right? Like, you can get those
yeah,
same cards cheaper. And I'll use Belgor as an example. I play 4 of them because he's just too good not to play 4 of. But you can technically play 2 of them or 3 of them if you have a lot of 4 and 5 cost spirits, because you technically are playing infinite copies of him
yeah.
because you just keep bringing him back out, right? So why do I need to play 4 and hold up that spot on my deck when that could be used for something that my deck is struggling with, right? I could add another Starblast Draw, or I can add another Thorn Prison, or whatever it is, those tech cards that we talk about that you might need that still help, though, elevate your deck and push it forward. Don't be playing random tech cards hoping you'll see a deck, because that's, once again, that is what sideboarding's for.
Yeah. I think that's a good point, is that your 3 and 4 ofs could also be determined by a flex spot, in that let's say you're playing a deck where you have Curse Dragon and you have Maduke, and you want to see both of them. You would love to play 4 of each, but you don't have room for that. You could go down to 3 Maduke and then 3 Curse or 2 Curse, whatever. And then your flex is that Reanimate, like you were saying, where the flex there is basically counting as a Maduke, also counting as a Curse Dragon, but even a little bit more valuable because it could really be, anything, right? So it's there's a lot of options when you're building to consider, and it's gonna have to come from a like your own personal taste. And I truly think the only way to get there is just playtest, 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 playtest. Play
I
with
mean,
your
yeah,
deck. See what when you draw cards, if you wish this card was another card, and you wish that card was a different card pretty consistently whenever you see it, probably needs to get swapped out for whatever you're wishing it was.
yeah. And like you said, it's really your play style. I mean, it's a hard question to ask because, like for Sad Mango, right? If your play style is, I want to be annoying as hell, you might play a lot of like control destruction cards or whatever that you want to see 4 of or whatever. Or like
Yeah.
if you're more of a I just want to finish the game early, you're gonna play more of cards that help you get that. So it's really in your play style, like or what you're not comfortable with. I mean, for me, I'll be honest, like I'm really not comfortable with the like super super wide long game, right? Because
Yeah.
I do have some blow up options, but those are not always guaranteed, right? So I kind of put cards in my decks that I play where it gives me that safety net, right? The absolute ice shield. There was a time where I was also maining Dream Bomb because once again, I'm not just using it for a specific card. It's just a way to like, oh my god, I can't get over this right now because I got low spirits. Let me just bounce this back to the hand and give me one more turn, which is what my deck needed. So it just kind of goes back to your play style, really. But definitely, I think the two big things I would say to take away from it is like understand the deck and what your deck is trying to do. That's key number one. Like, what is it trying to do?
Yep.
What are you trying to do with your deck? Whatever that might be. What are you trying to do with it? Do you have enough to achieve what you're trying to do with it? And I think me and Eric were talking about this the other day, right? We're messing with his deck a little bit. And I kind of said, well, now you're kind of changing the formula too much. You're kind of going
Yep.
away from aggro.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's hard. As players, we look at this card and like, oh my God, this would be so good. Or oh my God, this would be so good.
It's because
like,
it's because I love Brandbor and I just always want to stick him in anywhere I can.
Good old Brandy,
but then you were
yeah.
like, but Eric, if you do that, your deck is no longer doing what it was supposed to do. Now it's doing like that and kind of a Brandbor thing, and that doesn't really seem to work. So no, I think that's a good point. I think what you just said about knowing your deck and knowing what you're trying to do, I think if you know that information, you know how to answer at least somewhat most of the questions that we've discussed already so far. I think that's the key is just becoming super familiar with your deck and what it is trying to do and when it is trying to do those things.
Yep. Like it's really, I mean, that's it, guys. There's no right answer, wrong answer by no means. It's just our thoughts on it. But I definitely think, and I think a lot of us struggle with the same situation. When we play so many different card games that we try to bring some of that into this game or some of that mentality. And that is right or wrong. It's just it does not fit the play style of this game, right? Or maybe what this game's trying to do. And you hear sometimes on podcasts will like confuse certain rulings or something, or sometimes I have to ask myself, wait, do I mulligan here or do I draw? Because it's just so many card games that all kind of learn and feed off each other in a way and have similarities, but they are specific in what they do, and that's why we play them, right? Because it's different. If I had a game that played just like Magic or just like Yu-Gi-Oh, I wouldn't be playing it. I just go play Yu-Gi-Oh then, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly. That's what draws us to the game. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I struggle with that all the time in deck building because I always think of the cost curve to my decks in a very similar way that I used to when I would build Magic decks. And it just doesn't really quite work like that in Battle Spirits because you have so many other things to consider. You have the fact that you get a core every single turn, so you're never going to be mana screwed or mana flooded. You also have cost reduction. So if you play things early, now these bigger things are cheaper. So it's like you can't really math it out in the same way that you would for a Magic the Gathering deck. So having that background knowledge is helpful because it gives me a place to start, but then I have to unlearn a lot of things to be.
I mean, that's a good example though. Like with Magic, like for example, if you only have 4 mana in Magic, you have 4 mana, right?
Yeah.
Or 4 lands, right? Where in Battle Spirit it's different, right? Because let's just say the same scenario. Let's just say you technically need 5, right? You need 4 to play the card, plus the 1 to have the core on it. But in that same aspect, now that same card you just played not to be sacked, and you can still use that core for something else you need it. Because I've done it 100 times, right? I bring in Baculus, and then I'll sack Baculus to use that last core that I need to be able to bring Curse Dragon out, and then just ramp back up, and now I'm good on getting some core mana. So that's the one thing I like about this game, where like you're not completely tied down. I mean, you are in a way like to the cores, but if you use them wisely or use your own spirits just to get the cost reduction and then sack them. I mean, back in the day, right? The elemental guy with
Amethystus.
Depths, like and then Depths turn 2 because all I needed him was for that cost reduction. had the core on them, and then just sack them to use that again. And I think that's what I like about it. Like,
Yeah.
it's very simple, straightforward things, but it's those like skillful things that you can do within the game that will really give you the edge, based on your opponent on how they play. You know.
Yep. Well, those are all of our uh, kind of like competitive questions. And this is a casual petitive podcast. So half of that is competitive, the other half is casual. Um, let's move on to one of these kind of fun questions that we got. Um, this is from a member in our Discord named Type. They said, "Do you think a commander inspired format would work with Battle Spirit Saga? If not, why? And if so, what would be some of the rules?" I did also tag Overlord Ubel when I saw that question, because Overlord Ubel in our Discord was actually kind of brainstorming some ways that like a commander format could work in Battle Spirit Saga. So are you familiar with Commander? Have you ever played Commander? And Commander is a format that in Magic the Gathering, for those listeners who are not familiar. But have you ever played Commander, Angel?
Yeah, I have actually. I actually played Commander. Well, actually, I was playing Commander a lot more before I got into Battle Spirits because, I was in a little time period where I wanted to play Magic, but I was
Mm,
like debating if I wanted to play Standard or Modern, and Modern would break the bank after a while, and then Standard would just rotate out. So I played Commander because I like the idea of having your one guy and or girl, whatever your main spirit or your main creature is, and then it's singleton, right? You have one copy, 100 card deck, one copy of each thing. So it really brings that element of not RNG, but in a way of like, man, like you just can't go off. It's going to be what you draw, what you have with, and what can your commander do to help once again elevate. So I definitely think that will work in this game. I
you
mean, I
also
kind of go ahead.
it's been a while since I played Commander, because I mostly play like standard best of one on Magic Arena. But do you also have a larger deck and like more life? Am I
Yeah,
misremembering that?
I think you have 40. I think it's
40,
double.
40 life
So
and 100 cards, I
and
think.
100 cards, yeah. And I mean, on top of it, right? You also have what I like to call, I mean, Commander. You can play with another person, but it's really more fun with playing at least 4 people, right? You have the
Yeah,
politics involved with it. And
yeah,
honestly, with this game, I could see that at some point, just because you have X-rays, right? In a
yeah.
way, that's your commander. Like your deck is usually built around what your X-ray wants to do. Um, you just have to, take away all the, 2, 3 copies of the other. So I could definitely see that working for Battle Spirits for sure.
Yeah, and also when you cast your commander, I believe it costs like in Magic anyways, it's like 2 additional mana for every previous time you cast it.
Yeah. Yep. I think
So
that's correct.
you could easily just keep track of that with like a die on your commander the same way you would, or yeah, your commander in Battle Spirits the same way you would. I think it's definitely doable. To your point, we'd have to clearly define what a commander is. I think X Rare is a good way to do it, because those are like the big boss monsters that I think of as the commanders. Um, the the only thing that could be weird is I don't know if we want to build 100 card deck with like singletons. I don't know that there's actually enough cards to build uh, commander decks right now
Yeah, not yet.
that would be different enough from each other. Like I feel like if you're playing red, you would almost always have the same 100 cards for the most part, regardless of who your commander is. But who's to say we have to have 100 cards? We're making up an entirely new format. It can be whatever you want it to be.
Yeah.
Do you think that you'd have double life? Do you think you'd start with 10 life cores?
It depends, right? Because I think it depends on how they will build the commanders, right? Because I mean, this ain't real life, right? Let's just say my commander was Maduk. I think that they would need obviously reword a lot of things on it. It needs to be like a specific uh commander X-ray Maduk, right?
Yeah.
That maybe her ability is, I don't know, blood curse. Every time something happens, just happens. I don't know. Say something along those lines. I think that yeah, maybe double life will be necessary because you have to worry about blood curse instead of ramping up with it. You're actually putting in the trash, or I'm sorry, in the void. Um, it does not. It will hurt you more, right? It will put a player disadvantage. I don't know. I'm just throwing wild things like a yellow
Yeah.
X rare. All your magic cards they pay this, all your magic cards cost whatever, 3 less for this turn. So it just depends. Like I said, I definitely think that Commander, kind of like what Magic did, right? It needs to be its own set of cards because they have to have that synergy. I don't think you can take the card pool now and then play Commander with it. Just because there's so many effects and some of these extras that don't really translate very well with every other card you have available. Even if it was just like a 50 card deck, Commander deck, right? I think the Commanders need to have a special effect that kind of makes the game feel different enough that you don't have to go play Standard if you don't want, right? Or whatever they call it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Well, they could also, if they make commander specific cards, like if that's a format that takes off, they could make some crazy cards because they don't have to worry about them existing in the standard format.
exactly, yep.
And also they could have multicolored spirits, so that way your commander, because in commander as well, I believe your deck construction is limited to the colors of your commander. So, if you're building with Maduke as your commander, that means you can only have purple cards. If we're just like one for one porting it over, like how it works, in which case you wouldn't have Burning Force, you wouldn't have Ice Shield, you wouldn't have Dream Bomb. So that would be pretty difficult. But also,
I think it'd be fun though.
It would be fun. But also, Ice Shield as a one of is kind of like, whatever. Like,
Yeah.
especially if it's a 100 card deck, it's like you may never see it anyways. And in fact, me saying that just now makes me realize that having 10 life cores to start with would probably actually make sense because you don't have those tools at your disposal.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think what will make fun about that is, like you said, like commanders have their own niche ability, at least in Magic. And I don't know if you play Flesh and Blood, but like Flesh and Blood as well, right? Like your knight or whatever does X amount that's unique to that. I think that will really elevate this game to that aspect without, like you were saying, splashing other colors in. Because, like, man, I want to play a purple commander because purple's the only one that has whatever this tutor card that does this or does that. Or I want to play white because white's the only one that I could build a wall constantly and blah, blah, blah. So I do like that idea.
I also really like the idea of, and I talked to Overlord Ubel about this when he was posting in the Discord, limiting the spirits in your deck to only be the spirit types that are written on your commander. So like if you build Maduke, it would have to be all undead and serpent. Like,
I do like that. Yeah.
Wouldn't that be kind of fun? Like
that would be fun.
So thematic as well. And
yeah,
I think the reason this format could actually be quite fun is the fact that, like we were just talking about, like you don't have Ice Shield in every deck. You don't have Thorn Prison in every deck. And especially if you're limited to specific spirit types, Maduke, if you use Maduke as your commander, you may pick her as your commander because you want to play the serpents. Like you want to play Dragon Naga, you want to play, some of the curse dudes. So I think it's kind of cool. To answer the question, like, is it doable? I think yes. And then to go along with what you were saying, Angel, like, is it doable? Yes. Is it going to be like a fully fleshed out thing at this point? I don't think so. I think we need a larger card pool. And then I think if we want to get really serious into it, I do think we need like commander specific cards, like you were saying.
Yeah.
But Bandai's not going to make commander specific cards until we start playing this format and say, hey, this is something we want. Because that's how Commander became popular in Magic, is that it was a fan-made format. And then it got to a point where everyone was so fed up with Standard and the meta that Commander became like one of the top formats for Magic. And then Wizards of the Coast was like, all right, I guess we'll just go all in. We'll like make this official and really do this thing. And they started releasing like precons, like pre-constructed decks and like sets that are only playable in Commander. They have like Commander Masters sets and stuff. So if it's what the community wants, you'll get it, because we've also seen with Bandai that they listen. So I say, Overlord Ubel and who was it that asked this question? Type. If you all want to like start brewing something, I think that'd be awesome. Like I'd be down to try it out. I think that if you could make something that's fun, how cool would it be that you invented a format that people are playing? That'd be kind of neat, right?
Yeah. Well, that's something like even we talked about, which I think we're finally getting there from what I've seen. I think you sent that out today. Like sealed events, right?
Yeah,
Constructed and sealed events. That's something that almost every card game for the most part has. So I was highly surprised that for like most of this year, none of the grand opens had those side events. I mean, you and I experienced it, right? Like if you don't make it to day two, like, what do? You already paid to travel that far.
yeah,
Like, let there be some fun. Like, yeah, you got these winner box pods, but most of us players that are playing competitively probably have all the cards we need already, if not more.
yeah,
So it's fun to. Like, I think you did it. You know, you bought a one or two booster boxes, and between all three of us, we played our own. And everybody was like, "Oh, you guys playing this?" I'm like, "Yep." That's what we just did it ourselves, and it was so
yeah,
much fun. So I think that but once again, I think it's like with anything in like any card game, and I know Cosmic's really big on this, and I agree with this a lot. The game is only going to be as successful as the community that plays it, right? So if we're not even playing the regular Battle Spirits, or you're not even pushing this out there, getting people into the community to play it, it might not survive long enough, unfortunately, to be able to get the commander and all that could do awesome, right? The reason why the big three does what they do is because there's such a huge fan base and community behind it that, like
yeah,
you said, somebody came up with the idea because they love Magic so much. Oh, this might be a good idea. I mean, I think Modern was very similar. Like one of the other formats was very similar to that too. Like people want to play with other cards
yeah,
from previous sets. So definitely like, tie it over. I mean, anybody that's in Battle Spirits, if you really like the game, go out there, go to your locals. I mean, I usually try to give away a lot of my extra cards to the shop just to here you go, make demo decks out of it. Push it out there so more people know about it. It's a very new, it's still a new IP per se, in the West, and it does get overshadowed by everything else that's out there. So it's kind of it's
yeah,
on us to try to kind of push this game forward and talk about it. And I saw a comment a couple of weeks ago where someone said, "Hey, there's not enough Battle Spirit content out there." And we're like, I saw a bunch of comments like people were posting like Costa's channel, I think our podcast, like there's a lot of, but it just shows how many people don't know yet about this, and it's within its first year, right? So it's still early, but we
yeah,
really have to strike together to kind of push this game out there forward and comment about it and take those Bandai focus inspired surveys that they send out, because they do listen for sure. I mean, I personally was able to talk to them when I was at was it Gen Con? Yeah, it was Gen Con, and man, it was an amazing experience, and they actually like care. And a lot of stuff that they talked about, or we talked about at the shop as well, they're doing already. I mean, pretty quickly. So
yeah.
definitely put your input out there. It does matter.
I want to add too, if you're one of those people who finds yourself, and it's okay if you say this, if you find yourself saying, "Oh, there's nobody doing this, I wish somebody would do it." The cool thing about Battle Spirits is because it is so new and small at this point, you could be the person who does it. Like the whole the whole reason you're even listening to a podcast right now is that Cam and I were driving home from a Battle Spirits tournament, and we were just talking about the game for like an hour, and then we were like, we should just record this and put it up on the internet, because I would love to listen to a Battle Spirits Saga podcast. But at the time, there wasn't one, or maybe there was one, but it wasn't super popular, so I didn't know about it. And now we have a few options for Battle Spirits Saga podcasts. Not a whole lot, like not nearly as much as a game like Magic the Gathering has, but if you have a unique perspective that you want to add, start a podcast. If you have a game type that you want to play, make it happen. I actually built a draft cube out of my extra Battle Spirits cards because I have so many, and I haven't had a chance to play with it yet, but I have it assembled. So hopefully, you, me, and Cam, I'm thinking maybe we're all supposed to hang out tomorrow, so I'm gonna see if we can bust it out. Could be fun.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
All right, last question. Thanks for the question type. And Overlord Ubel, I know you were super excited about getting some sort of commander thing going, so I'd love to see some collaboration in the Discord if y'all want to work together, or if one of you on your own wants to do it. That would be cool. But Sad Mango is our last question here with what CCG or TCG do you want to play, but you know that you never will, due to either poor business practices or because it's more of a guilty pleasure or just overload of card games? Overload of card games is so true. I think, Angel, you were just even talking about like this happens to both of us all the time. Like when we're mulliganing, I'm like, how do I mulligan in this game again? Is it like this? No, that's Disney Lorcana. Is it like this? No, that's Magic. Oh yeah, it's like this.
Yeah, yeah. It's like so much to it.
Yeah. So how do you feel about that? Are there any TCGs or CCGs that you would love to play that you just feel like you don't have the time for, or that you just, don't really feel like they have the sticking power for you or anything like that?
Yeah. So for me, I may have a few, right? And it's not. I mean, there's some that maybe I don't like, but I would say for me, more the struggles why um maybe I don't play some of these card games is just the lack of support, right? I'll use this one
Yeah.
as an example, right? I was very excited to play Shadowverse when it first came out. Hyped up, bought a bunch of booster boxes, got these guys into it. I was
Yeah.
playing the CCG for a long, long time. And I haven't even touched that actually in a while. But then there's literally it's dead. And I hate to say
Yeah.
that, but like there's no support. The prices are off. So I'm like, oh, that sucks. It's still I mean, it's a really fun game. It really is. It's nothing against the game itself. It's just the lack of I don't know what you want to call it, maybe organization or what the structure is. And there are other games, like Force of Will. There's would like to get back into Dragon Ball Z, but it just when you start playing card games, Card Fight Vanguard's another one, right? I would love to get into those games, but I look at least in my perspective, like I'm tied up in other games that I'm playing very competitively, right? Like if I
Yeah.
wasn't playing Battle Spirits the way I am, along with like I do play Hearthstone as a CCGs. That's like my competitive Legends of Runeterra, Marvel Snap is in there for fun, but I still play that pretty heavily. It's not enough time in a day to
Yeah.
play everything I would love to play because I would love to give all card games a chance because they're all I mean they all have a unique thing. They're very fun. Some do better than others. Some I think are just a milk cow and are milking the TCG market, unfortunately, and flooding it.
Yeah.
And the game is just complete trash. Because I mean, I don't want to call anybody out, but some games I played, I'm like, why is this even a card game? Like, this is so dumb. Like, you
Yep.
either stole somebody else's idea or like play style. But I would just say like if I had more time in my hand, and not or let me say that if I had less hobbies, right? Because I play video games, I got all these other stuff I do. It's just hard to like invest my time. And our shops, at least where I'm at locally, if it ain't the big three, you're not playing anything, right? So, and
Yeah.
that's the disappointing part. I think we were gonna try to visit a shop when we were out there in I think it was Tulsa that I think played all or they want to play all card games. I wish we had something like that where we're at because I would love to like if I had the time every day try playing Buddy Fight or playing Final Fantasy or playing whatever, because I think every card game is fun in its own way, and I'm a sucker for card games.
Same.
It's just some are just unfortunately a little better than others, and it kind of goes back to I mean some of it's out of our control. Obviously, I think Shadowverse is really out of our control, but uh, like Shadowverse, I mean, I think that's probably the biggest disappointment for me this year, where it's like, man, what happened? Because they have the foundation, they have the support, they have other Bushi games. It's not thriving, unfortunately.
They
So
even did a really cool thing with Shadowverse that I was actually pretty excited about, where if you could like do well in their pro circuit or whatever, you could like win a free trip to Japan to compete.
yeah,
And like I
yeah.
was pretty hyped about that when they announced it, and then it just fell so like even if I went to one of those events to try and qualify, there wouldn't be enough people for it to actually like be a qualifier.
Yeah, no,
um
exactly. And like to answer Sam Mangles, right? Like not almost a bad business practice. I mean, I think they have room to grow, but I mean, I'll use Magic the Gathering, right? Like I love
yeah.
Magic the Gathering. It's a very fun game. It's very complex. You have to be very analytical in that game. And when I was trying to get into the TCG aspect of it, it's a mixture of things for me. One, the amount of freaking product that gets shoved down your throat
Yeah.
almost every month was literally overwhelming. I mean, I think even like I was talking to my wife about it. Like when I was into it, man, I was buying the new set and the collector's box and the secret layer. And granted, you can argue, well, you don't have to buy that. Well, no, you're right, but it just I would literally it'd be spoiler season the set would come out, maybe play like 2 weeks of it, and everybody talking about the next set. I mean, at least that's what
Yeah.
it felt like, right? And then
Yeah.
you have Arena, which I feel like you can say that as TCG in a way, but it's really I mean I call it TCG, but um, it's a little bit the same with that, right? But I feel like it's a little bit more at your pace, what you want to put. Oh, you can technically play it for free, honestly, and not have to do a whole lot, and you can still get a
Technically.
decent amount. Technically, I mean, let's realistically, you probably need to put $100 into it, get some packs, but
Yeah.
it's just one of those things. But I would say like it's just, and I don't say they have like super bad business practice, but they kind of do, right? Like I remember, I think it was this year where they're trying to come out with that set that's supposed to, all them cards that were never
Oh,
supposed to come out again,
yeah.
and they were charging $1,000, and they
They're
got
not even
boycotted so
legal.
quickly. They're not even legal, right?
They're not even legal.
So, in Magic, and we're talking about a thing today too about Magic the Gathering, like business practices, their card quality. I mean, calling Pringles obviously for a
Yeah,
reason.
the foils. We were talking
Yeah,
about that,
so
the foil difference between Magic the Gathering foils and compare a Magic the Gathering foil card. That game has been around for like what 30 years now because they just
30
did that
years,
30,
yeah.
yeah. And compare a Magic the Gathering foil to any Bandai game, any of them. Like any Bandai foil card is going to look 10 times better than a Magic the Gathering foil card.
Oh yeah, the
It's
details.
just
I mean, the
yeah.
best example I use, go pick up if you don't have one, or I'll try to put on this. Actually, I'll put one. I'll put it on the Discord later. I have a lot of Dragon Ball Z Super card games or cards, and I show these guys like the amount of details and textures on that card is insane. I think I made a joke today. Like I've had Magic cards that I said that I think it had like less than 10 minutes of oxygen, been in a binder, and it's still pringled up. And I have Dragon Ball Z cards that have been in binders for like 10 years that are still crispy as day one. So, but all in all, I mean, I'll put it on Discord later so you guys see the Dragon Ball Z cards if you have not seen one yet. But
Yeah.
to answer Stat Mango's question, like, I mean, there's a lot, and I said a lot of it might be because of business practices, but I think a lot of it just comes down to time and what's my
Yeah.
return investment in it, right? Battle Spirit is a huge return investment, not just because of the community and the people I've met because of the game, the cash pricing, the game is just fun. And if even if it's not locally played currently where we're at, there are these big events that are reasonably okay to get to, right? Now I would say the same thing about Battle Spirits, though, right? Like if all the grand opens were like in foreign countries or international, there's no way I could play the game. I'm not traveling that much, constantly. It's just realistically not possible. But
Yeah.
the ability that there's grand opens in different cities and you get to see, I think you and Eric were talking about this, like I will probably never go to some of these cities. And I'm glad that the grand opens were there because we got to meet some super cool people and hang out with some of you guys that we've met. So I think there has to be a huge return on investment on a trading card game for me to really want to try it out and play it.
Yeah. Those are all great points. I think it kind of comes down to very similar things for me. There's this level of accessibility. There's also the community behind the game. Not just how many people are involved or behind the game, but also the like demeanor and overall like personalities of the people behind the game. To answer Sad Mango's question directly, is there a game that I will never play but I really want to? I don't think so. I think Angel and I are the same way, and Cam. I know he's not here, but I'll speak for him. If the game is a card game, we will try it.
Yeah.
If it's a card game, I'll try it. I love card games. I've been playing card games since my very first one was Yu-Gi-Oh when I was like in first grade, kindergarten, something like that, like very young, maybe first or second grade, somewhere around there. And I just love like shuffling and having cards in my hand and the randomness, but also the strategy. There's just something about a card game that just really scratches an itch for me that like nothing else ever will. But I do have favorites, and the game that immediately comes to mind, and it's not that I never will play it ever again, but it's my favorite game, and I never really play it anymore. It's my absolute favorite game. I love it. I think it's the best card game ever made. It's Android Netrunner by Fantasy Flight Games, originally designed by Richard Garfield, then redesigned by Lucas Litzinger, and then later on, the lead designer got changed a few times. But man, the way that game works is that one person is a runner or like a computer hacker, and then the other person is like this evil mega corporation. And the mega corporation has these agendas, so they're trying to push their agendas out. And the runner is trying to hack into the corporation's computer servers and expose these agendas to the public, basically before the corporation is able to successfully do the thing. So the corporation, and there's like the storytelling component of this is insane because there will be like maybe in the game there's like a faction or a corporation called Jinteki, and Jinteki uses clones, and this is all like set in like a cyberpunk future, but Jinteki uses clones and they aren't very nice to their clones, and they're doing all sorts of shady things behind the scenes, like when they'll like sell out these cloned people to do like services and things, and then when they aren't useful anymore they'll like incinerate them, like do like really horrific like evil things. And then the runner goes in and you're trying to break into their servers and show the public just how awful Jinteki is, and like show everybody all these evil things they're doing. And it's like the storytelling component, the actual like gameplay mechanisms that drive you forward in the game. Basically the corporation, if they get 7 points worth of agendas scored before the runner is able to steal 7 points, they win. And then if the runner steals 7 points, they win. And when you're running on servers, you're checking face down cards. You're like, if you run on somebody's headquarters, their headquarters is their hand. So you get to look at a random card in their hand. And then if it's an agenda, you steal it. And then there's also research and development. So you can run on their R&D, which is their deck. And you flip over the top card of their deck. But the corporation can also protect their servers with ICE, which if you're familiar with like cyberpunk, I believe it's short for intrusion countermeasure electronics, but it's basically like defensive programs that then the runner has to play their own programs to like break through. Anyways, not to get super in depth into Netrunner, I already did basically, but I just love that game so much. The tension, the moments where you're like flipping a card over and then it's an agenda, and like if there's people watching, they probably go like, whoa, you know, it's just one of those games that I have never been able to find anything quite like it. It unfortunately came to an end in 2018 when Fantasy Flight Games discontinued it. However, it has continued with some fan-made expansions, and they actually just had the World Championships for it recently. They've continued the organized play for it. This fan group has. I have tried a couple of times to get into it, but it is just so difficult. The information on it is not as readily available as it was when it was being released by Fantasy Flight Games. So I never know like what cards are legal, what cards are coming out, when they're coming out, when and where these like big tournaments are. I could probably put the time and effort in to figure it out, but like I'm so busy with Battle Spirits and then like my job and my regular life and stuff. And also Netrunner, like to your point, Angel, like Battle Spirits does have the like monetary component to the prizes, which is not like the reason I'm playing the game. Like at the end of the day, I love playing the game, but traveling somewhere, it makes it a lot easier to justify like spending a bunch of money on a plane ticket if there's like also this opportunity where like maybe I walk away with some money or at least pay for the trip. For Netrunner, I'd have to travel far because the World Championships, I don't remember where it was, but it was somewhere not in the US. And it's like, I'd have to pay all this money to go and then I would leave with nothing. So even if I got first place, I would leave with nothing. I would leave with like a play mat.
And that's how Yu-Gi-Oh was. Yeah. You know, it's like, oh, cool, I get a cool card that probably can never be played. So I get that.
Yeah.
For sure. Like, it's, I mean, I don't think I answered Sam Mango's question. A game that I would like to play, because I love the artwork for it, will be Grand Archive for sure. A CCG that I would never put a single dollar on and I did not care about. And I don't even know why it's even a thing. It's My Little Pony, but whatever.
I've actually played that. I've played it.
Oh my God. I was I didn't want to, is it fun? I don't get why that's even a thing, but
I played it when I was in high school. My friends and I would always go to like Walmart and buy like Magic cards and like draft or whatever. And one night we were just feeling a little silly and we each got a My Little Pony like starter deck and played the shit out of it like all night. It was fun. It was very unbalanced and also I'm not really like a fan of that IP personally, so it was not really something I could get into.
I will play Transformers for anything.
Have you played the Transformers TCG?
No, but it looks fun from what I've
that
seen.
game
It looks interesting.
That game is a blast. I got really into that for a minute, but it was kind of like I was buying all of the cards and then like I think I played against Cam like a couple of times, but it never really went anywhere. And I think they discontinued it, didn't they? the Transformers TCG?
I think they did. I could have swore somebody had brought one back because I could have swore it was like another set that was coming out, but I could be wrong on that. I said a lot of these TCGs, I think, and I think there's an article about this, and we all talked about it. Just how like I think it was you and I were talking about this the other day. Like TCGs out of nowhere have exploded, and I remember being young, right? Like, oh, you play trading card games, you're such a nerd, or you're just this, or like nobody cared. Or it's just you had the big three like the Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh. Magic, obviously. I think there were some other ones when I was younger. I forget what it was. There's like one more when I was younger that was very popular.
Duel Masters and
Duel Masters and there's something else. And then now, I mean, just go on TCG Play or anywhere like TCG for this, TCG for that. I mean, we were just at Gen Con, and the amount of more upcoming TCGs that developers are trying to create and come. Some great, some probably should just stay in R&D, right? Because it's not that good. But I just hope that, and I love TCGs, the more it comes out, the better it is, right? Because Battle Spirit's one of those. I just saw it. Oh my God, I love it. I'm hooked. I just hope that, which I know it's not, right? Because I gotta be realistic. It's all about business. But I feel like sometimes the market gets flooded because it's just a money scam. Like, oh my God, people are gonna want to love collecting these whatever Star Wars cards. And yeah, you're right. They are because it's Star Wars, right? And then the gameplay, it's just, which I heard Star Wars is actually not bad, but I'm just using that as an example. And then the gameplay is horrible. It might not be, but I'm just saying, like, somebody came up right now, like, I'm gonna make a card game of South Park characters. I probably go buy them, and the game be completely butt because nobody wants to play it,
Yeah. That could be a fun one to just have like starter decks that you play with every now and then.
Yeah, summon Eric Cartman. Go.
Yeah. It's like, now, kitty, that's my pot pie.
He's like, shut up, Kane.
Actually, the bad business practice thing when you brought up the Fantasy Flight Star Wars game, Sad Mango. I think I'm gonna make that my answer to your question. I love Netrunner, and I think I will play it again. But the game I will never play is this new Star Wars game. And it's honestly, and I think Cam and I have talked about this on the podcast before, it's honestly just because he and I both have been burned by Fantasy Flight games one too many times. They have done us dirty. Like Keyforge for Cam, which is like his favorite game. They had this amazing game with this incredible IP, and they just dropped the ball with it. And they had a great Star Wars game before, which was Star Wars Destiny, which I actually did get into for a minute. And then they got rid of it. They dropped it. So I'm just kind of like, what's to stop them from doing that with this new Star Wars game? And then even Android Netrunner was a Fantasy Flight game, and then they ended it in 2018. It was some sort of like licensing thing, but it wasn't even that. I think they just didn't want to pay for the license for it anymore because it's they own the Android universe, but they don't own the Netrunner mechanisms. I think it's owned by like Wizards of the Coast or something. I'm talking out of my ass, but it's just like
it's owned by somebody. Who knows?
It's owned by somebody else, and they didn't want to renew the license, and they were just like, we'll just end the game that all these people love very abruptly with. We'll just go silent for a while and then say nothing, and then all of a sudden say the game's over, even though it's doing really well and a lot of people really like it. And I'm just like, this new Star Wars game, cool. But what about Destiny? Like, Destiny was around for a minute. I really liked it, and then it dropped off. And I don't really understand why, because I felt like there were events to go to. There were lots of people playing it. At least I felt like there were, because I could find places to go play Star Wars Destiny. I could find the cards for sale at Barnes & Noble. So it was like, I don't get why that happened. So that's my answer to Sad Mango's question is like, I don't know. I'm sorry, Fantasy Flight games don't like. I love your games a lot, and I think that's why I'm being so critical. Is they make awesome games. They make incredible games. They just have burned me one too many times, and there's a thorn in my side, and it just sucks because I love their games. But anyways, that's my answer.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's what any game or anybody, right? Like, we're like the common folks, right? We spend our hard-earned money and time to play these games, invest, destroy relationships sometimes. I'm just kidding, but like, I'm just kidding. But you invest so much time to into these companies or these card games, and then sometimes it just become more about the money or more about whatever, and kind of lose touch and focus with the core group and what it was about. I mean, look at Magic killing off the Pro Tour, right?
Yeah.
It's just it blows my mind, and I get it. It's probably reasons behind my pay grade to know why they do those kind of things, but
I may be
it,
wrong, but did they bring the Pro Tour back after that?
they might have. I'm not sure.
Okay. I could be wrong
They
about that.
should.
Sorry.
They should.
Yeah, it was like
But
one of the coolest things about Magic, which is cool that Battle Spirits has it. But
yeah,
anyways,
yeah,
sorry,
for sure.
continue.
But anyways, but yeah, no, I mean that's the point. So I get it. We should be passionate about not trusting sometimes certain companies if you've been burned because we're humans, right? Nobody wants to be burned. Nobody wants to spend all this money. That's how I felt a little about Konami, right? Not that they were like deliberately doing it, but maybe they were. I don't know. But I just felt like every 2 to 3 months that ban list would come out, and I knew I had to fork up another, I don't know, $700,000 deck just to be able to even play the game competitively enough. And they knew what they were doing because then they would get reprinted like 2 months later. Uh,
Yeah.
which is frustrating, and it's one of those things where I mean, there's more to that, right? The community kind of got toxic, but for the most part, right? Like it's just very frustrating that you spend all that time trying to do everything you can for that company because you love the brand or whatever, and then you just get burnt on it. And that's just across the board. It could be car manufacturers, food, restaurants. That's just nature. So
Yeah. Well, I think that about covers it.
yeah, I think we answered everybody's hopefully questions. Yep.
Yeah. Well, thanks everybody for submitting those questions. If you want to submit some questions, I don't know that we're going to do a full like question episode again like this, but maybe we'll start splashing them in here and there. Come join the Discord. The link is going to be in the description of the video if you're watching this on YouTube, or it's going to be in the show notes if you're watching this elsewhere. Also, while you're there on YouTube checking out our Discord, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. That's right, I'm asking again. And the reason I'm asking is because the last couple of episodes I've been asking, and our subscriber numbers have been shooting up. So hopefully me reminding you is helping. I promise I'm not trying to be annoying, but there is an incentive for you to do it as well, because when we hit 100 subscribers, we're going to play Battleshot Saga, which means that we're going to take a drink whenever we lose a life core. So we're going to stream that live, and then we're going to post the video of it later. So definitely don't want to miss out on that. You could be one of the first 100 subscribers to our channel that makes it happen. That would be super cool, super fun. And other than that, yeah, just come chat with us on the Discord. You can send us an email at absolutebsspod@gmail.com if that's more your speed. Or if you want to just chat with us directly, just come straight in the Discord. Feel free to ask us questions. Post your pictures of your decks in there. Just come in and hang out if you want to just like lurk around and see what people are doing. Anything else you want to add, Angel?
No, like I said, appreciate you guys in the Discord giving us a topic, and I like that. The interactions were the biggest thing why I like the battle spirits in the community. So please keep asking on there. I know sometimes I'm not as engaged as I should be. It's just been busy with the pro tour and work, but definitely, like I said, if it's something that we want to talk about or a hot topic, put it up there. We'll talk about it. We'll go at it and get everybody's views on it. So appreciate everybody that's in there and engaging. And anybody that asks questions, once again, appreciate y'all.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks everybody. Yeah, you just reminded me. The next time we're on the podcast, I think we're going to be coming back from the Netherlands, so that should be a fun episode. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, I do the no bad luck this time.
Oh yeah. We'll see. Maybe one of us will be the champion of the Netherlands. You never know.
Never know.
I don't want to jinx it, but all right. Thanks everybody. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time. See you later.
Peace.